Welcome to Toronto, 1977. Punk is back.
Thank you so much for being here. I'm really excited to be able to introduce Chris Houston, who is from the Forgotten Rebels, and he's here to do an acoustic set for us tonight.
This song tonight I am playing on Queen Street. I used to live here for a few years. The song is about Queen of Bathurst, that beautiful place that used to host that magnificent institution known as Galaxy Donuts. If you want a bad acid trip with harsh lighting, go there. It's no longer there. It's now it's a Starbucks. So anyway, let's go back, way back when Queen Street was nothing more than porn stores and furniture stores.
Thank Liz so much for making this labor of love a reality, and I can't stress enough how important this music is for someone like me, because I managed to steal all your ideas and win the war doing it. So thank you. I would, but I spent the money already on your records. So. What made you decide on a start time and a start date or finish date for this scene, but also what made you decide on, obviously Teenage Head played a huge part in Toronto, but those two cities and I guess to a lesser extent London, but there were Windsor. What was the reason for cutting off certain things from other things?
When I started this book, I had no specific timeline in mind. All I knew was that I wanted to focus on the first wave of the Toronto scene. So that timeline just happened naturally based on the stories that I was told and based on people's personal experiences. And by the early 80s, for a lot of these people, things were moving on and new bands were starting to come up. Some people had left Toronto for various reasons, and those are instrumental people in the scene as well. So things were changing by that time. So that's why those timelines ended up coming together, but it wasn't anything that was pre-planned. In terms of the cities that the book focuses on, I found it was really hard to talk about Toronto without including Hamilton, because of bands like Teenage Head and Forgotten Rebels. And when I was documenting those stories, I found that it was really hard to talk about those bands without talking about Simply Saucer, because they had also had a lot of influence on what was happening there. So that was just a natural progression. In talking about Toronto, I soon realized that Hamilton was a really important part of the scene here too.
That's funny, because in the book it really comes across like, with the exception of Simply Saucer and to a lesser extent Teenage Head, but how quickly it all came together. Like you look at England and there's this pub rock thing that transitions into kind of pre-punk and then punk, and even in America there was sort of like glam undercurrents that transition, but it seems like all these bands, like a lot of these people, these are their first bands, first times picking up instruments. It just seems like the germ, once it hit Toronto in such a major way that doesn't really have, too many connections to the other cities in the way their punk scenes developed, which I thought was amazing, because it's almost like this was predestined. I'm gonna go on a tangent here, but this is why I hate the Clash, because Clash could have been the Clash in 1966, 76, 86, 96, but I think what makes a band like, Vile Tones, Curse, Forgotten Rebels, Teenage Head, all these bands, etc., is that they were of the time, They were perfect examples, and they would not have they could not have existed in any other time or place, and that's what I thought was so amazing. But you had to, I guess, the book couldn't go on forever, but there were bands that couldn't be mentioned. Is there any bands that you kind of like, in retrospect, kind of were like, oh, they should have been involved a little more, or should have been represented a little more? I guess like you're limited by the amount of ink in the world because it could be a really long book.
Save it for the sequel.
Yeah, this is volume 1.
You definitely have to know where to draw the lines, and especially with an oral history, everything has to be pretty tight, right? So all the stories have to link together in a way that makes it one story, which is very difficult to do. And if you make it too sprawling and include too many bands, then eventually those dots don't connect so well anymore. But I really wanted to give a sense of how big the scene was, because I think that just the fact that you can even ask that question of how you decide where to draw the line just shows how many bands there really were in Toronto, and how big this scene was at the time. And I think that we still see that today with the Toronto music scene now, is that there's always so much going on. So we've obviously always had a really healthy scene.